Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be doing a more in-depth, detailed and technical discussion of the thunderstorm risk this weekend, and especially the focus of this video will be on tomorrow, Saturday, where there is a risk for some quite intense thunderstorms, especially across parts of the Midlands and Wales. So we'll start off by looking at the convective outlook that I made about an hour ago, just to give a kind of overview of things, and you can see the kind of interesting areas are the slight risk and the enhanced risk. So the slight risk is across parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, southern England, northwest England and the Midlands, and then the main area is this level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk across parts of Wales and the Midlands, including Birmingham, and it's in this zone where currently the risk of thunderstorms appears to be the highest. But that might change by tomorrow, so stay up to date with my Twitter if you want to see the update tomorrow. And then getting more into kind of the weather side of things, I thought I'd start off by giving an overview because it's good to get a broad sense of the overall picture, and then you can go into the details. But this is the 500 millibar height chart, which is basically showing the level of the atmosphere at which the pressure is 500 millibars, and for reference, the pressure at the surface is usually around 1000 millibars. So this is typically about 5 to 6 kilometers up in the atmosphere, and so it's kind of good for showing kind of the overall synoptic setup. And you can notice two main things here by looking at this chart, which is valid tomorrow at 3 p.m. So number one, you've got this big low pressure system out here with the winds kind of flowing like that, and then we've also got this high pressure to our east. And then in between those, what happens is you're kind of pulling up a southerly wind across the UK by tomorrow, which means the air is going to be warm or hot, and it's going to be humid as well. And so that kind of generally leads to the development, or not always, but increases the risk of thunderstorms because the atmosphere is very unstable. And so really tomorrow we've got quite a typical or classic pattern for thunderstorms across the UK. Then you also might notice something else, and that is these lines here, the isobars, are quite curvy. They've got lots of bumps in them, as you can see there, which is showing hints of subtle short waves at this level, which can bring kind of more localized areas of lift, where the air is kind of forced to rise. If you just imagine that's the ground and that's kind of the atmosphere, the air is forced to rise, which can promote the development of storms. And so you can also notice that we've kind of got this small area here where the colours, or which is showing the wind, are kind of slightly stronger than the surrounding colours, which is blank. You can see those blue and purple colours here showing the stronger winds, and that's associated with a fairly subtle but perhaps slightly more significant shortwave trough, which is going to be moving up in a northward direction during the afternoon tomorrow. And what that might cause is a kind of slightly enhanced area of lift across parts of the Midlands and especially Wales, which will help thunderstorms to develop. So that's kind of the overview there, and then we're going to be looking into a bit more detail now. So one of the most important things for thunderstorm to develop is kind of instability, which we measure as CAPE, or convectively available potential energy, which is basically the energy in the atmosphere for thunderstorms to use and develop their updrafts and have lots of kind of lightning and heavy rain and that kind of thing. And you can see that tomorrow, if I run through this chart, by the way, this is on the high resolution French model, the Arome, typically reliable because high resolution is generally better, so it's a fairly good model. But you can see that across parts of England and Wales tomorrow, we've got lots of bright colours showing up on the map there. You can see those greens, those yellows and those oranges, especially across parts of Wales, the Midlands and into northwest England, as you can see there. And that's showing we've got those high instability values, 500 to 1000 relatively widely, perhaps in spots 1500 to 2000 joules per kilogram of CAPE, and that's pretty high values, especially for the UK, where I would consider anything above 1000 to be pretty significant. So this is showing that across the Midlands and Wales, we've got enough juice or energy for some big explosive updrafts and thunderstorms tomorrow. Looking at this in a slightly different way, this is something called a sounding or a skew-T, and that's kind of showing the atmosphere in a more kind of 3D look through the atmosphere. And so I took these soundings off this model on meteociel.fr, a very good website for weather data, and I'll just quickly try and explain it. So the red line here is the temperature line going upwards. As you can see, this is the height above the ground, 0 kilometers, 1 kilometer, 3 kilometers. So that's kind of the height upwards. And then this black line here, the x-axis, is the temperature. And you can see the red line is kind of the temperature going upwards into the air. And then the green line is the dew point going upwards into the air. And then these numbers along the bottom, that is the temperature, and it's a bit confusing, but you read them diagonally like that. So just to give kind of a demonstration to make sure everyone understands, if you want to find the temperature at 3 kilometers, you follow along that line where it meets the red line, and then you trace that down, and you can see it looks like it's I mean, my lines are pretty bad there, but you can see it looks like it's about 2 or 3 degrees at 3 kilometers. So now that I've kind of explained that, what I can show you now is that the profiles in the atmosphere are very favourable for deep and explosive updrafts and convection tomorrow, and that's because this dashed line here is the forecast temperature for an imaginary sort of parcel of air. So the sun heats kind of the air and it rises like that, and as you can see, it's warmer than the red line, which is the environmental temperature. And when something is warmer, it's less dense, so it rises, and that pretty much shows that there's instability. And the area in between the red line and the dashed line is kind of graphically showing our CAPE, or the juice for storms, which I just showed you earlier. And you can see that across, I think this was taken around Oxfordshire at tomorrow evening, actually not evening, tomorrow at 4 o'clock. You can see that we've got lots of juice for storms indicated by those thick CAPE profiles. And you can also see that especially in the lower to mid levels, that instability is the thickest, which kind of shows that the instability is focused into the low and mid levels, which will allow those storms to rapidly develop and possibly have some explosive updrafts and convection. This is a similar thing, just a different location, and that's early in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. And you can see that there's lots of instability again, and once those storms start to initiate, there might not be that much stopping them once they've got going, because they're going to have all this energy to use and properly become strong. So now that I've kind of talked about the environment, so we know what the storms will be like, I'm going to talk a bit more about the more localized ways which storms might be initiated. So I mentioned earlier how there was evidence of a shortwave trough across parts of kind of Ireland, and then that was extending its influence, as you can see, into parts of Wales and the Midlands, and we were likely to see some lift, or the fancy word is ascent, but basically the lift of the air kind of being lifted upwards to form storms. So that was one thing that I mentioned. However, to complicate things a little bit, there is actually some differences in the models about the exact placement of that trough, because if I show you the high resolution Met Office UKV model, you can see that the kind of bump in the flow, which is where our shortwave is much further east, and so the lift would be kind of focused, actually no, a bit of a bad drawing, but the lift would be focused kind of more in this zone, a bit further east. By the way, this is at 3 o'clock. However, if you remember that image and then compare it to a model like the Icon, you can see that here the shortwave is a lot further west, so the lift from that shortwave is likely only going to be extending more across parts of Wales and the West Midlands, so the thunderstorms might be further west. And that's important because we don't quite know where those thunderstorms are going to be, and I'm going to use this chart to kind of show you. This is the UKV model, which I just talked about, and it's showing the kind of forecast radar for the afternoon tomorrow. And notice how I said the shortwave was a lot further east on the UKV, and notice how these thunderstorms are a lot further east. I mean, actually I haven't compared them to anything yet, but the thunderstorms here are more kind of further east than other models, as you can see, with a line of intense thunderstorms extending kind of from London and then up in towards the Midlands and Wales. But if I show you a different model, for example the Arrow model, you can see the focus of the storms are slightly further west across more Wales and the Midlands, and that's especially true if I show you some of the past runs. As you can see, for example, this run had that convection further west as well. And let me show you some other models. The Icon model, for example, is showing those storms almost firing only across kind of Wales. As you can see, those blobs of kind of precipitation there. So there is still some uncertainty on the exact placement of storms tomorrow. But I mean, I'd probably go for more of a middle ground scenario, just because those things always kind of, in weather, the middle ground is not always, but usually kind of a safe bet. So I would say the shortwave will probably be providing forcing across this sort of region, in between kind of the Icon and the UKV. Another kind of mechanism which might help to initiate storms could be convergence as well, and that is when we have the surface winds coming in from different directions. They bump into each other and then they travel upwards, and you can definitely notice that on the UKV model, where we've got a southeasterly wind here across most of eastern England and southern England. However, the wind is slightly more southerly from this direction, and then you can see kind of bumps into each other in this little zone there, and that also correlates nicely with where they're seeing those storms form on the model. As you can see, a band there, and then we've got a band there. So that might be another mechanism for causing storms to initiate tomorrow. So there's kind of a couple of things in play, as I just talked about there. And then I'm going to finally, kind of to finish off, go through the most likely evolution of tomorrow, in my opinion. So as I just mentioned, we're going to have this shortwave coming in from the south during the afternoon, and that's likely going to be bringing kind of some ascent across Wales and the West Midlands in this kind of zone, like I just showed you there. And that's going to be kind of reducing any capping or temperatures inversions, which could put a lid on convection. So that's going to be reduced during the afternoon, and the atmosphere is going to kind of being prepared for storms to form by the shortwave trough. And then at the same time, we're likely going to see that convergence zone developing across parts of England and the Midlands. A bit of uncertainty on exactly where, but somewhere around here, and possibly localized convergence around higher ground like the Cotswolds or the Chilterns, or maybe kind of the mountains of North Wales. So we're going to have that convergence zone in play, and I expect that storm is going to start to initiate around around 1 o'clock or so, along those convergence zones and across parts of the Midlands from that shortwave trough. And then, because the atmosphere is so unstable, as you can see here, we've got lots of cape, what's going to happen is those storms are going to become very intense with lots of heavy rainfall, possibly some hail, nothing massive, but maybe 1, 2, possibly 3 centimeters, gusty winds, and of course lots of lightning. And as they continue moving northwest in this direction across parts of the Midlands and Wales, they possibly could grow into something a bit more organized, maybe some multi-cells, maybe something more large scale as the Arrow model is showing there. And then possibly towards the evening, there might be a continued risk of storms across that convergence zone into parts of more southern and central England. So that's kind of what I'm thinking tomorrow. I hope this video was relatively easy to follow, and I hope you've got a slightly better understanding of what might happen tomorrow. And of course, I'll be doing updates on Sunday and Monday as well, which could also be pretty active days. But anyway, if you watched to the end, thank you so much, and have a great weekend, guys. Bye.